Coming up, the Heismanments. Dennis Dixon in action tonight. All he's got to do is have some good games, win some good games, and he's got the Heisman. That's it. Apparently it doesn't matter what Tim Tebow does, and I think he should be the Heisman Trophy winner. We'll run down the Heismanments, and you'll hear why it's Dennis Dixon's to lose. It's coming up, Dan Patrick Show. Because I think it should go to the best player in college football, not the best player who's an upperclassman who plays on a marquee team in a marquee position who has fewer than 2 losses. Why don't you just come out and say that that's the criteria? Because Tim Tebow can't win it this year, and he's putting up unbelievable numbers. He's got some good skilled position players, doesn't have a running back, and I believe that he's put up running and passing and will put up unbelievable numbers when it's all said and done. But you got 3 losses, he's an underclassman, he can't win it, right? It's Dennis Dixon. Dennis Dixon's to lose. Oregon plays Arizona tonight. Let's bring in Chris Huston. He writes for Heismanpundit.com. He's got the Heismanments. All right, give me the candidate right now who fits the criteria for the Heismanments.
Well, right now it would be Dennis Dixon. He's the front runner. He's the guy. It's his race to lose right now. He's the top player on a national title contending team. He's a senior quarterback. He's putting up great numbers, rushing, passing. He's proved himself to be a Heisman-worthy candidate at this point in the season.
Yeah, see, the problem I got is, well, it's probably with the old criteria, maybe it's still there, the criteria of you can't be a freshman or sophomore, you can't have more than 3 losses, you got to play for a national contender. Would you say those are check still with voters?
I think so, although I think this is the one year where losses haven't really been, as big of a factor just because the race has been so crazy and it's kind of mirrored the whole national title race overall. And I think voters have seen how anybody can get upset and they've seen how certain players are, playing for teams that maybe have 3 or 4 losses, and they're not completely discounting them right now. But they are looking at Dixon, and he's, obviously in the national title race with his Ducks. And then you have Chase Daniel coming on the outside with Missouri. So I think, and then Tebow, he's got 3 losses, but, his numbers are just so incredible, I think they just can't ignore him.
Can a sophomore win this award now?
Ordinarily, I would say no, and the Heisman would say no. But I did have a little caveat in there when I first wrote them saying that if there was such a year such as this where everyone pretty much screwed up and somebody came along who was a physical phenom who came out and had just an outstanding year, the kind of year that you just couldn't ignore, that could be the year where that happened. And this could be that year with Tim Tebow. He could be, the chosen one who comes out and is the first sophomore to win it. And when you throw for 3,000 yards and rush for almost 1,000 and have 51 touchdowns in the SEC, which he's on pace to do, it's really hard to ignore that. But even then, it's not necessarily a done deal, and it's going to be very iffy, for him to make it.
See, I just don't understand that, though, Chris, that if you look at those numbers, it is at a powerhouse. He is playing a marquee position, and he's putting up numbers in a great conference. I have to leapfrog Dennis Dixon, even though Dixon's in the national title race here, because if Florida's in the national title race, this is a foregone conclusion, right? That Tim Tebow,
sure.
That's really what this hinges on. Florida's not playing for the national championship, and Dixon is.
Sure, it's kind of the weird Heisman karma, how it all works out. But, Tebow, the voters think that, hey, I can always vote for him next year. He's a sophomore this year.
I hate that.
It's kind of a weird psychology. They look and say, oh, well, he's doing really well. But look at Dixon. He's a senior, and, he's a great story. And Chase Daniel, look what he's doing with Missouri. And they're thinking, oh, well, he's a sophomore. We can get him next year. But I think that's changing more this year. I think they might be thinking, well, he's having such a great season. Next year may not be the right time to do it either.
But also, if you look at this, Chris, the voters are cringing at the thought if you give it to Tebow this year, oh my gosh, we may have back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners, and we don't like that.
Well, that'll never happen again. That's Heisman number 9, which says there'll never be another 2-time winner for various reasons. And I just think there's always some kind of strange thing that happens where somebody wins and some other player comes up and rises to the challenge. And it's one thing to have a Heisman-worthy season one year, but to have it 2 years in a row when no one else is doing it, very, very difficult.
Well, can you remember when it was this late in the season and we really didn't have that front-runner, clear-cut choice for the Heisman?
Yeah, the last time the Heisman ceremonies will have been this kind of uncertain, it's probably 1995 when you had Eddie George and Tommy Frazier and Danny Werfel all very worthy Heisman candidates going into the ceremony, and no one was really sure who would win. And if you look at it, it was the running back from the traditional power that had a great year. And the other two kind of canceled each other out, and they were the two quarterbacks for the national title contending teams. That was the one year, I'd say the last year, where there was three worthy candidates on this par.
He's Chris Huston from Heismanpundit.com joining us on the Dan Patrick Show. But if you look at this award, I brought this up a couple of days ago, where some of the voters, I think, are now looking at the pro potential of the person they vote for with the Heisman, because these voters will say, yeah, I did vote for Eric Crouch. Yeah, I did vote for Danny Werfel. Yeah, I did vote for Andre Ware, Gino Torretta. Are you finding that is factoring in as well?
I don't think it's a conscious thing. I think it's a subconscious thing, and I think what they don't want to do is the voters don't want to be burned. They don't want to vote for a guy and have him, later turn out to be, a flop, in the NFL. So I think they do take that into account. And if they can get a guy who's a top NFL draft pick, so much the better. But I think, there's such a wide swath of Heisman voters out there who vote for various reasons, and it's such a mysterious, process, and no one really knows, why they do it. And the Heismanments are an attempt to kind of make sense of, kind of the psychology of how the voters vote. But I think, with Tebow, you got a guy who's obviously going to be an NFL prospect. Dixon's, a guy who, may or may not be. I think the biggest factor right now is that you got three spread quarterbacks who are the top three Heisman candidates, and I think that shows how big of an impact the spread has had in college football the last couple of years.
But you're also careful to say, look at a system in the numbers that are put up. So you immediately remove Colt Brennan from the equation, any quarterback at Texas Tech. Can you look at the systems of what you have at Oregon or Florida or even Missouri and say those systems factor in the numbers being put up by these quarterbacks?
Yeah, the voters are very sophisticated to the point where they hate system quarterbacks, but it's always tough because, the spread's relatively new, so, there hasn't been that kind of sense that the spread is creating these numbers. Whereas Texas Tech, there's been, so many guys who haven't made it in the NFL, there's a sense that this system is definitely producing the numbers. In the old days, it was BYU, there was a sense that the system created great quarterbacks versus great numbers. So you had, this long line of great quarterbacks, and it was proven, and therefore, Ty Detmer wasn't punished. But, you had Andre Ware when it at Houston, and he didn't really make anything of himself, and that's why guys, who followed him weren't really rewarded.
If you look at what Dixon has left, you say it's his to lose. He doesn't have a difficult schedule, although this is a team that has failed down the stretch. UCLA, Arizona, and Oregon State. What does Dixon have to do against those three opponents to ensure he wins the Heisman?
They've got to win, first of all, and he's pretty much just can't look bad. I mean, he's pretty much just has to do what he's been doing, throw for over 200 yards, 2 or 3 touchdowns, no more than an interception per game, rush, get some timely rushes, show leadership, all that kind of stuff, get Oregon to 11-1 and on the brink of the BCS title game.
Good stuff, Chris. Thanks for the insights. Thanks for tuning us into the Heismanments.
Thanks.
All right, that's Chris Huston. He's Heismanpundit.com.